Yes, sir. All good? Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. All right, that sounds nice and bright and ready. We are about to start. On behalf of the TIU team, of course, I want to, before we formally begin, just tender apologies for the delayed start. But we thank you for your patience, and we are really and truly ready to start this exciting morning. All right? So, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the official launch of the Change Evangelist, Tools for Effective Change Management. What a fantastic name. I am Kamisha Swaby, your Master of Ceremonies, and I'm delighted to guide you through today's event hosted by the Transformation Implementation Unit, the TIU. To officially begin, may I invite you all to stand for the national anthem. Please be seated. Our national anthem says, "Give us vision, lest we perish." How instructive is that line? Today, we are celebrating that vision. The vision to change, but not just change. It's to change for better. But I share something with you. You know, as Jamaicans, when something changes, suddenly we often say, "Ah, what happened now?" Because you know that sometimes we have that thread of distrust that runs, and we're a little bit skeptical about everything different. And when it changes again next week, what do we say? Again? Something else is wrong. Change in our culture is oftentimes met with side eyes, suspicion, skepticism. And let's face it, the public sector is not necessarily known for moving quickly. But what if we could change that reaction? What if we could equip our public servants with tools that make change predictable, structured, even welcomed? That sounds exciting, right? Those were response moments, ladies and gentlemen. Sounds exciting? Excellent. I heard yes from this table, but I don't only want to hear from this table, right? That's why we're here. The Change Evangelist is Jamaica's guide to managing change our way, with our people, for our future. This is a big deal. And I'm not talking about the KFC big deal that sent the country into a frenzy last week. Anybody made it into the lines? Anybody got through early? Not I, but I certainly was happy for all the people who did. But let's talk about this big deal. We're very, very glad that you showed up for this event. And we're also happy to have the participants who are joining us virtually as we are live streaming. Now, to do the official welcome, let me now invite Ms. Maria Thompson-Walters, Executive Director of the Transformation Implementation Unit, to the platform.
Thank you, Kimisha. Good morning, everybody. Change is the law of life, and those who only look to the past or the present are certain to miss the future. John F. Kennedy. Minister Favor Williams, Cabinet Secretary Mrs. Audrey Sewell, Permanent Secretaries, President and CEO of the VM Group, Mr. Courtney Campbell, Dr. Kevin Brown, President of UTEC, Ambassador Joan Underwood, Managing Director, Underwood Talent Development Services, heads of entities, specially invited guests, ladies and gentlemen. Let me begin with a true story. Not long ago, I was in a certain ministry. I won't say which one it is. And we were waiting for the elevator alongside everybody else. You know, you press the up button because everybody's going up, and we waited. And so you press the down button so that it comes a little faster. And we were still waiting, nothing. And of course, I was dressed in my TIU shirt. There's a gentleman standing beside me, and he laughed. And he said, you know, this elevator is like government reform. Everybody wants to go up, but nobody is sure how it's going. And I laughed too. But there is a truth in that. We at the TIU are committed to changing that truth. Today we gather not just to launch a publication, but to ignite a movement. The Change Evangelist is not merely a handbook. It is the button, the motor, the blueprint, the maintenance plan, and the fuel. It shows us how to move, not as individuals in silos, but as a unified force with purpose and clarity. This digital playbook is a tribute to a visionary. It bears the name of Dr. Marvia Evangelist Roach, whose intellect and passion laid the foundation for Jamaica's public sector change management program. Though we lost her in 2021, her legacy lives on, not just in this resource, but in the culture of transformation that she inspired. We honor her memory today with deep respect and lasting gratitude. And if you indulge me for a moment, coincidentally and purely coincidentally, I just realized this yesterday when I was going over this speech, that Dr. Evangelist Roach came to us from Victoria Mutual, where she did the same role. An amazing, amazing woman. Like many governments worldwide, we face entrenched challenges, bureaucratic efficiencies, fragmented systems, limited resources, and of course, a natural resistance to change. At the same time, though, our citizens are demanding more. The world is moving, and as a consequence of that, we have to move with it. Our citizens want transparency, responsiveness, accountability, agility, a digitally enabled and citizen-focused government. And this cannot be achieved by policy alone. It demands action-focused transformation, change at our very core. Change management is not just a process. It isn't a checklist. It isn't buzzwords on a PowerPoint presentation. It's about shifting hearts and minds, and sometimes a seismic shift is required. It's about how we think, how we lead, how we serve. The Change Evangelist is built on GOJ's 8-step change experience, drawing on John Cotter's model and ProSci's ADCAR, but made for our public service. It guides users deliberately through a structured approach, focusing not only on the theory, but more importantly, the how. It gives us tools, templates, and stories, all in one digital playbook. And I don't know about anybody else here, but I've worked on tons of projects. And everybody always says change management is what is important. You have to have change management. And there's lots of theories around change, but guess what? Very little about how you move from theory to action. This playbook helps us in that respect. With the support of Ernst & Young, we have created a playbook for our reality. And of course, they have our sincere thanks. The Evangelist is available to every public officer and entity across government. Lasting change must be embraced, not instructed. And that is why we have, at the TIU, a dedicated change management office. We also know that tools mean nothing without the people that bring them to life. Through our CMO, we have hosted over 20 workshops. We have trained more than 600 public officers and have established change agent networks throughout the public sector. Coaching and mentoring continue in real time from the TIU. This is not just metrics, this is momentum. But no strategy succeeds without leadership. Change demands leaders who listen, who empower, who persevere. It demands inclusive engagement where every voice, whether of a communications officer or a permanent secretary, is heard and valued. So today I offer this call, not only to transformation, but to courage. Let us not fear change. Let us lead it with conviction and compassion. Let us transform that stalled elevator into a lift of progress, powered not by force, but by shared purpose and people-centered innovation. Let each of us say that change begins with me. Whether strategist, policymaker, or project manager, your leadership matters. I welcome you all wholeheartedly to this launch. I urge you to engage fully today in the discussions that are ahead of us. Leave here energized and ready to shape a modern, capable, citizen-focused, ready for the future public service together. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maria, for reminding us today that we're not just launching a playbook, but we are igniting a mindset shift. Indeed, ladies and gentlemen, managing change is not about process, it's certainly about culture, right? And see, that broken elevator theory, I like it. And I like what's powering that sort of change that you're speaking about to bring everybody together. Fantastic. Maria also welcomed our specially invited guests. I want to tender apologies on behalf of the Financial Secretary who was unable to be with us today. So we're pleased to have with us today the Honorable Audrey Sewell, who is the Cabinet Secretary and Head of the Public Service. Despite her busy schedule, she certainly made this event a priority. And at this point, I'll now invite her to bring greetings. Please help me make her welcome.
Thank you, Madam Master of Ceremonies. And the protocols have already been established, but permit me to acknowledge Honorable Favour Williams, Minister of Finance and the Public Service, other executives, colleagues all from the public service, good morning, as well as others who may be from other organizations and institutions who have come this morning to be with us, to participate in this very, very important event. It is both an honor and a privilege to bring greetings at this official launch of a pivotal and timely resource for Jamaica's public sector transformation, the Change Management Playbook, aptly titled The Change Evangelist. Today marks not just the release of a document, but a declaration of intent, a clear signal that the Government of Jamaica is serious about building systems, competencies, and culture. As Kamisha would have said, it's a change of culture to manage change effectively, consistently, and substantially across our public service. We are here because we understand deeply and collectively that change in the public sector is not just inevitable. It is vital if we are to transform the public service into an efficient and responsible public administration. And if the past few years have taught us anything, it is that change is not always orderly. It is rarely convenient and often overwhelming, especially in systems already burdened by complexity, bureaucracy, and legacy structures. The Jamaica's public service is no stranger to reform. In fact, when Prime Minister Holness announced the establishment of the Transformation Implementation Unit, TIU, in 2017, he acknowledged that Jamaica was not short of policies and plans. What was indeed, he stressed, was an action. He declared that what was needed indeed was action. He declared that public sector transformation was a national priority and used the moment to outline the government's key areas of focus, making it clear that his administration would place a strong emphasis on implementation. Like many of you, I have been a public officer for several years, and we know where the pain points are very well. There is no question that we must change. It is how, though, we go about changing. And that is why the change evangelist is so important. It guides the people's side of change. The change evangelist is more than a set of tools. It is a framework, a guide, a call to action, And it comes at a time when transformation is no longer a distant goal. It is our daily reality. Ladies and gentlemen, it is no secret that managing change is critical to success. We could put in the most expensive and elaborate systems in the quest for efficiency. But if our people do not change, if they do not adopt and adapt, we would have failed in our efforts. And so we owe it to ourselves, our people, and our country to commit to making the public service a much better place. That you are here is a signal of your commitment to the transformation journey, and we welcome all on board. In closing, I encourage you not just to download the playbook, but to live it. Make it part of how you lead, how you plan, how you communicate, and how you go about your business on a day-to-day basis. Let us become not just managers of change, but champions of change. Let us together be change evangelists. Thank you, and I say congratulations to everyone who made this vision a reality. God bless.
Thank you very much, Ms. Sewell, our Cabinet Secretary. Ambassador Sheila Sealy-Monteith, Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, also has sent her apologies this morning. So, Ms. Sewell, PS Sewell has given us the charge, CABSEC Sewell has given us the charge to not just download the playbook, but to live it, to use it, to let it become a part of culture. Right? Indeed, what we know is that change is constant. And I tell you, as a mom of 2 small children, this is something I see every day because I don't know how the shoe sizes change so quickly. Right? But change is constant and it's important because I'm sure over the years you are also going to be so proud to see the growth and transformation in the public service. So just a reminder that the playbook is available for download on the TIU's website, and you get a copy along with other resources on a memory stick in your package this morning, right? So I love people are checking to make sure they've gotten theirs. Yes, right? You were not left out. You did not have to join the long line for this big deal. All right, I want to do a quick pulse check before we have our very next important keynote speaker. When you hear the word change at work, because, change means different things to different people. To a new mom, you hear change, they think of diapers. The people over here understand the life I have been living. When you hear change, if you're watching a football match, you think of who is coming off and is this going to be the best player at this time in the match. So let me ask you, when you think of change at work, in the public service, what's your first emotional reaction? Is it excited, a chance to grow? Is it curious, I want to know more? Is it cautious, I'm going to wait and see? Are you overwhelmed, gosh, it's another thing for me to handle? Or are you resistant because change means that there's some risk that you're going to have to consider? I want you to turn your attention to the screens, and you can also scan the QR code that is included in your folder. This will take you directly to this quiz so I can know what you are feeling. Or you can, if you can't find the QR code and that's taking you too long, you can go to menti.com, M-E-N-T-I, menti.com, right? The poll is live on screen, so I'm getting to see the live reactions. And when you go to menti.com, enter this code, 56167688. Right up there. I'll give you a moment to jump in. And this is an anonymous poll. So feel free to answer honestly. Your response will help us get a real-time sense of how people across the room typically feel about change. So, I like that we have some curious persons. You want to see what's going to happen. You want to know more. And I hope it also means you want to know how you can play a part. Yeah? All right. We have responses coming in. This is great. So, 37 persons have responded so far. Cautious, yeah. Some people want to wait and see, yeah. But I hope in the caution you're saying, I'm still going to participate. Do my little part, you know? Because it can't just happen to you, you know. You have to participate in creating it. Okay, great. We're growing in excitement. Any more excited people want to add their perspectives to the board? But yes, the reality is we will have some people who are a little overwhelmed, perhaps because they've had to be managing a lot over the years. So remember, we're just as interested in anything that you might have that may not seem as positive as we are in your positive comments, because what we want to know is the real deal about how you feel. And look, some persons might also be a little bit resistant to change, and that's for varied reasons. All right, so we see where we're trending. I want to thank you for participating in that quick temperature check. So as you can already see, there is a wide range of emotional responses whenever we start talking about change, and that is perfectly normal. This is exactly why change management is so critical. It helps us to turn that mix of emotions, be it excitement, caution, resistance, into constructive engagement and ultimately project success. You'll hear much more about this in our upcoming panel discussion, and thanks again for being a part of this very quick activity. Ladies and gentlemen, at this time, please help me welcome Minister of Finance and the Public Service, the Honorable Favour Williams, a champion of change, who will deliver our opening address.
Good morning, everyone. A champion of change. I love that. So let me acknowledge our Cabinet Secretary, all permanent secretaries who are here, Mr. Courtney Campbell from VM Group. I know we also have in the room Dr. Brown from UTEC and other persons from UTEC. Good to see you, Dr. Brown. Let me acknowledge Ambassador Joan Underwood, yes, consultant of a firm that bears her name, heads of entities, or fearless Executive Director of the Transformation Implementation Unit, Maria Thompson-Walters. And I know we have another Courtney here this morning from a new entity within government that looks over the budgets to ensure that they are sustainable, they are good budgets. Thank you, Courtney, for being here. It's part of the change in government, this time a whole new entity. So, drawing on the previous speakers, CABSEC and Maria so far, I am convinced that the case for change has been made and we must now co-create the future. And yes, Maria, I have begun checking out the change management playbook. And it starts with establishing the case for change. So ladies and gentlemen, what is that future we seek? We seek a Jamaica where citizens will choose Jamaica first to live, work, raise families, and do business. We also want a country that has a vibrant and sustainable economy, society, and environment. High level of human capital development, greater opportunities and access to these opportunities for the population, and a high level of human security. If we compare what we have today relative to, let's say, the days of my parents, well, let's say if they were alive here today and look back in their days, they would say, wow, Jamaica has changed significantly. But for us, because we're living it and our expectations are rising every day, it doesn't look as if we are making significant changes. But I'd ask you to pause and think back. Certainly in government, yes, even though we complain, but there have been changes, significant changes within government. And it's going to continue to evolve, and the Transformation Implementation Unit is part of that enabling foundation. But achieving the continued change that we want, ladies and gentlemen, will continue to take time and effort, and it will require the energies of all of us every day, day in, day out, doing the things that we do when we need to do it. As you know, the public sector touches every aspect of our lives. And if you can find an aspect that it doesn't touch, let me know. Seriously, think about it. From healthcare and education to infrastructure and social services, it is pivotal in shaping the quality of life for all Jamaicans. However, like many nations, Jamaica faces challenges, some inherited, others emerging. These challenges demand that we reimagine how our public sector operates. Key among these challenges are inefficiency and outdated systems that stymie growth and innovation. And we have been identifying those systems and taking steps. And again, the work is going on. It might not be visible to you yet, but in time, I know that some of these systems will emerge for all of us. So while strides have been made over the years, we must now take decisive and bold steps to modernize, streamline, and reposition the public sector. So transformation is not an option. It is a necessity. Since assuming portfolio responsibility for the public service last year, I have certainly felt the weight of expectations, not just from within the system, but from the Jamaican people. They are asking us to deliver more in a much shorter time, and I can say that they are right to do so. Yes, they are right to put that pressure on us to deliver more and more for them. Phase 1 of the Public Sector Transformation Program laid a solid foundation. We're now in the final stages of approval for the next phase, and I'm excited about what it represents. The new chapter will accelerate digitization to improve accessibility, efficiency, and transparency. It will build capacity within the public service so our officers are equipped for the 21st century challenges. It will drive results by embedding performance, accountability, and citizen experience at the heart of public service delivery. So let me be frank, the next phase will demand more resources, more coordination, and much more change leadership than phase 1. But the scale of the challenge only reinforces the importance of getting it right. and getting it right, we must. So that is why the change evangelist is so important. And, you know, I can tell you I was coming in here expecting everybody to have a turban on their head. Well, the change evangelist recognizes the need for collaboration and partnership across all sectors of society. In this regard, stakeholders, who are employees, citizens, businesses, unions, and special interest groups, must remain actively engaged in this process. Their insights and support are invaluable in driving meaningful change. In transforming the Jamaican public sector, it is not merely about fixing what is broken. It is about reimagining what is possible. It is about creating a system that serves its citizens with excellence, empowers its workforce, and stands resilient against the challenges of tomorrow. I know that you believe, and I do too, that all of us, we have an opportunity to build a government that is agile, people-focused, and future-ready. A government that reflects the best of who we are and the boldness of who we can become. So I want to implore you this morning, let us embark on this journey with determination and unity, knowing that the dividends of our efforts will be measured in improved lives, stronger communities, and a Jamaica that shines as a beacon of innovation and progress. Yes, I know the task is monumental, but the rewards are boundless. Together, we will transform the Jamaican public sector into a pillar of national pride and global admiration. So I say to you, do not get weary. Change is continuous. And just because we break it down into phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 100, does not mean you should kind of just fall back. When we say change is continuous, we mean it. It keeps happening every day. We are purposeful about it, and that's why we bring it here this morning. That's why we have a playbook, which is essentially a guide, a comprehensive guide to what it is that we have to do. And I am really, truly glad to see that transformation keeps happening, because we have a way in government of starting things and then stopping. It just peters out. But here we are in the next phase of transformation. So do not get weary. Kind of get the next wind, and let's keep going. So today is the Change Management Playbook. As I said, a comprehensive guide. But to be effective, all of us have to embrace it. And by embracing change, we can navigate with greater ease, resilience, and purpose. So I want to say thank you to the Transformation Implementation Unit, an entity with which I work closely, not just since I've been at the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service, but certainly during my years at the Ministry of Education and Youth, to get that ministry in a place where they have begun to embrace in a meaningful way technology, not just in our schools, but in our regions all across the system, so that they can become more efficient in terms of their record keeping. We want to get to that point where when the teachers get to their retirement years, it doesn't take long for all their records to be pulled together. It will be all in one place, and at the click of the button, they'll be able to continue into retirement with their pay in hand. Ladies and gentlemen, there is a lot to be done. I'm excited. I hope you are too. And again, I want to encourage you, just because you hear about change management, change this, transform that, just keep the focus. Change is continuous. It has to happen every day in order to see the results. So my final word is that if you see me leave, it is because I have 5 graduations today. So I've got to run out. Courtney, I know that your speech is going to be great. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you so much, Minister Williams. She spoke about change and the change management playbook as an important tool to empower excellence, engender resilience, and embrace agility. And we can understand, Minister, and we do forgive you for making a change of scene, because we know you're going to celebrate with some young people who are embracing some changes themselves going forward. So we get it. Ladies and gentlemen, since the introduction of the playbook, over 600 public officers have been trained in the use of it. How useful is it? In this short video, we hear from the Child Protection and Family Services Agency how they have benefited from the use of the GOJ 8-step methodology. Please turn your attention to the screen.
Hello, I'm Carmen Mullins, Regional Director, Southeast Region at the Child Protection and Family Services Agency, CPFSA. So the CPFSA project was about improvement of the organization's ICT infrastructure. This included upgraded internet connectivity and telephone systems, as well as our psychosocial and our behavioral modification initiatives. My role in the transformation project was to lead the change and communication work team that included communication, ICT, and HR team members. The GOJ 8-step to change acts as a roadmap to guide how we manage the people side of the change. It allows us to encourage and engage our staff members throughout the regions and also the parishes. Gaining the buy-in from the regions was initially a challenging one. It was compounded by the flow of limited information. However, we started with the initial stage, the case for change, and employees started asking questions. They were more engaged. They even give insight as to how the implementation process should go. Of all the 8 steps, the case for change was what stood out for me. This explained the rationale of the CPFSA's transformation project. With that in mind, we got the buy-in from the staff members throughout the regions and the parishes. This was what really got the project going. Without a doubt, I think this change methodology can be used throughout the public sector. Change is difficult. However, with this 8-step model, it can make change much smoother. It is often said that government has challenges with project implementation. However, I am confident if this methodology is adopted and utilized effectively, the rate of success will increase. I would like to express my sincere gratitude to the TIU team members for their dedication and commitment to the project. We have seen great improvement in our case management system. It has helped our team members to be more efficient. We are truly grateful for all elements of the project, which has helped us to better serve the nation's children.
Another round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. That was very inspiring. And that is the kind of change we want to see. A lived and absolute reminder of the change evangelist, that it isn't just theory, but a practical tool that's real, that works, is already making a difference, and already available to you. Ladies and gentlemen, it's now my pleasure. Before Minister left, she said when she heard evangelist, she had a thought that she might have come into a more spiritual sort of environment. And I will say TIUT, when I saw it, I said, I like this name, because I'm a girl who grew up in the church myself. And I dare say that our next speaker, some might even call him an evangelist. But he is a visionary leader from the private sector who has successfully transformed a major financial institution. He's also no stranger to public sector transformation, having served on the Public Sector Transformation Oversight Committee, PSTOC. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Courtney Campbell, President and Chief Executive Officer of the VM Group.
Thank you very much, Kamisha. Good morning, everyone. And I want to especially greet our Cabinet Secretary, Honorable Audrey Sewell, other permanent secretaries who are here, Mrs. Maria Thompson-Walters, Executive Director of the Transformation Implementation Unit, Ambassador Joan Underwood, Fiscal Commissioner Courtney Williams, President Kevin Brown, right in front of me from UTEC, other leaders and change evangelists, that's what I'm calling you now, from across Jamaica Public Service who have assembled here this morning for this very important event. And I know that we have some friends from EY. Greetings to you. I join Maria in paying special tribute to Marvia Evangelist Roach. She was indeed a star in the VM group. And eventually we loaned you to her, and then the Lord took her from us all, right? But I know that she did a good job while with us, and that she did a good job while with you. First, I'd say, though, congratulations, heartiest congratulations to the Transformation Implementation Unit on the tremendous work that you have done. And I'm not surprised for two main reasons. One is that everything rises and falls on leadership. Do we agree? And I have the highest regard for your Executive Director, Maria Thompson-Walters. I met her when I served on the Public Sector Transformation Oversight Committee, as you heard. I was a representative of the Jamaica Employers Federation, but I found Maria to be a diligent, professional, reliable, humble, and gracious leader, and of course a great communicator. Do you agree with all of those? And I believe that our nation is blessed, Maria, to have you in this role. And the second reason is about you, our public sector leaders. Jamaica has some fantastic public servants at all levels. I'll be honest with you. In my time as a banker and as a leader in the financial sector, I've had occasion to do business with many public sector leaders and managers and people at different levels. And I've often said, I wish this person were on my team. Can't you believe that? I'm seeing the brilliance, I'm seeing the talent, I'm seeing the commitment. I say, I wish this person were on my team. And that's not a one-off comment. And I have first-hand knowledge of the public sector because my parents were public servants. My father worked most of his life in the forestry department of the Ministry of Agriculture. My mother was in the postal service. And I've, as I said, have the highest regard for the many shining stars who are in Jamaica's public sector. Now, special congratulations on the launch of this playbook. My understanding is that you are recognized in the development of an application of a consistent and structured change management methodology that is being introduced to enhance the success of change initiatives, especially for improving the delivery of public services. And this is worthy of celebration. I think the team deserves a round of applause. Now, why do I say it is worthy of celebration? We have a wonderful national pledge. And I think we could say the second half of it together. Before God and all mankind, I promise to stand up for justice, brotherhood, and peace, to work diligently and creatively, to think generously, and so that Jamaica may, under God, increase in beauty, fellowship, and prosperity, and play her part in advancing the welfare of the whole human race. A beautiful national pledge. But despite this solemn commitment that we have all been repeating from we're in short pants, we have really failed to deliver on these aspirations that Jamaica would increase in beauty, fellowship, and prosperity. We became politically independent 63 years ago, almost 63 years ago. But the truth is that the economic extraction model that was pursued under colonial rule was characterized by the former colonial masters taking from our nation without investing in our infrastructure or our institutions. And the truth is that we've been trying to build better institutions since then. And there have been many success stories of which we can be proud, but the majority, unfortunately, of our public institutions are not operating at the level required for us to advance and to realize our 2030 vision. And we just need to look at, for example, our per capita income of about $7,000 US, which pales in comparison to those in Trinidad and Barbados and Costa Rica and the Bahamas and so on. Professor Orlando Patterson, who did the education report, he wrote a book. I'm hoping that we'll take some time to read it, those who have not yet read it, called The Confounding Island. Have any of us read that? The Confounding Island. We should read it. And he's saying that in that book that we have a serious implementation deficit. It was written in 2019. So he was using information on Jamaica published up to then. And he made the point in the book that over 70% of our workforce, according to some researchers, had no formal training, had never passed any kind of examination. And he made the point that this, however, was not a failure of policy. Indeed, the World Bank had even praised the Jamaican government for its successful focus on education policy and a strong household demand for education reflected in high and increasing public spending on education. So we knew what path to take, but what we had bungled was the execution, the procedural knowledge of how to make the educational institutions work. And Professor Patterson, like the writers of Why Nations Fail, which is another book I read, they argue that while policies matter of far greater importance are effective institutions that are also well managed and good politics by political leaders who learn from their mistakes and make institutionally appropriate choices that lead to better outcomes. So, in a few weeks from now, we'll celebrate our 63rd anniversary of independence. I think we all agree that we want to develop and lead more effective institutions that deliver better outcomes in our schools, offer better service in our hospitals, produce higher detection rates in our police force, higher standards in our public infrastructure, our roads and bridges, our water supply, our sewage disposal, our garbage collection, our fire services, better environmental management and town planning functions. You, the change evangelists, can be the navigators and the catalysts for the new and better path. You can play a significant transformative role in building more effective public institutions. And I would say to us that this transformation process is an opportunity to reshape our institutions in ways that reflect who we want to be as Jamaica. You know, another Harvard professor, Rosabeth Moscanta, said, happiness comes from serving a cause larger than oneself. Meaningful work keeps people motivated in tough times. And I would say to you that this transformation of Jamaica's public services to facilitate that hoped for Jamaica of increased beauty, fellowship, and prosperity is one larger cause in which I'm confident that you will find fulfillment and serve to keep your inner flame ignited. And that is why this change management program is so important. And I offer my endorsement of structured change management because we have used it with more than reasonable success in the VM group. So what is our change management model? We use the ADKAR model. ADKAR. Awareness, A for awareness, awareness of the need for change. D, desire, and I think you use it as well, to participate, the desire to participate in and support the change. Knowledge, knowledge of what? Of how to change, right? Ability, the ability to implement the required skills and behaviors, and a reinforcement to sustain the change. And I would say to you that we have implemented 4 major transformation journeys over the last 9 years. And these 4 major transformation journeys have been pursued in challenging times in the financial sector, in the context of some major exogenous shocks. So, for example, I remember early on we had the Barbados bond default and restructuring. And lots of Jamaican institutions invested in Barbados instruments. We had COVID-19, which was a once-in-a-century event. And we, you know, in no time, most of our team members were working from home. It's a good thing that 2 years earlier we had approved a remote work policy, and that the IT team were had equipped a lot of laptops and so on with VPN connections so that we could quickly implement that. We had, in that regard, supply chain disruptions and the resulting spike in inflation and interest rates, liquidity tightening, bond price changes and the impact on capital. All these things are individually big issues to navigate, much less all coming at once. And then even more recently now, it continues. This year we have tariff wars, and last year generative AI and robotic process automation. All these are significant changes. And in the midst of that, I would say to you that we have implemented 4 transformation journeys. Not 1, but 4. And we have more to undertake, right? So the first thing that we did was to transform our revenue base. VM will in November this year be 147 years old. We were founded on November 14, 1878. Whose birthday? Is it? November? All right. So Cabinet Secretary was born on one of VM's birthdays, right? So we said to the team that VM was known VM base at the time was known for two products: residential mortgages, and we had a loan, a cash secured loan called a share loan. That could not take us in the future because our members were asking for more. So since then, we have introduced a whole host of new products in the building society alone. Construction loans, business mortgage, commercial mortgages, credit cards, auto loans, unsecured loans. And so now, after 147 years almost, the residential mortgages are just in the 80% of the total loan portfolio, because the diversification has really begun to take root. And in addition to that, we looked at the rest of the financial group. The wealth management introduced 9 unit trust products. New products introduced in pensions and in money transfer. We introduced new business lines. In the UK, we have a team there, led by Jamaicans, but involving other people, we are now lending development loans to UK developers. And we're taking business from some of the largest banks in London. And that's being led by a Jamaican institution. And I think we are very proud of them. We invested in a Caribbean-based fintech called Carolend. So all of those things, new products, new services, new business lines, we have transformed our revenue base. It's much more diversified now than it used to be. And what we have done, how did we do that? Because we took time out to hear from our members and clients. What do you want that we're not offering to you? They were saying that VM is my favorite institution, I'm loyal to you, but there are some products, credit cards and auto loans that you're forcing me to take them from elsewhere. And it's just that process of listening and then ensuring that the product that we have was responsive that has helped us to grow in that way. And so our market share in loans 9 years ago was just 5%. And we're not doing the big corporate loans like the others, and we have almost doubled our market share in the period since then. So, and one of the things we have done is to ensure that service standards were being measured. We had SLAs in place to say that mortgages should be approved, mortgages of certain amounts should be approved within X number of days. What was our compliance rate then when we started the journey? 20%. And just by publicly displaying for everyone to see within the team how we were tracking, that 20% moved to 30%, to 60%, to over 90% where it has remained since then. No new technology, no new staff, just publishing the information for everyone to see. The transparency is so important. So I'm encouraging you to make agree these KPIs and publish them for everyone to see. We're not publishing them to embarrass anyone. It's not about that. But when the sunshine shines on the grass, it gets greener. Right? Agreed? The second transformation journey is a digital transformation. And we were facilitated in this by EY, strangely enough, right? Who helped us to understand, again, what we're hearing from our customers, what our current capabilities are, and then we became very aware of our gaps, and we plotted a path of digital transformation that would have lasted about 4 years. But we agreed the KPIs of how do we know that we're transforming. And since then, we have introduced upgraded online banking, mobile banking, credit cards, online for wealth, online for pensions. I'll give you one statistic. In our money transfer business, from 0 to now 38% of our remittances are coming in via direct to bank. People do not need to line up in a remittance outlet to collect their cash, right? Just because of that digital transformation program and listening to the people. So that's one example of what we have had with our digital transformation. And then the brand transformation. The brand transformation, we wanted to communicate to the public that BM is now much more than a mortgage company. And remember our old logo, in which we had the house and the circle. So we removed the circle. And we change it to this logo that says, we're always transforming. We are the pulse of Jamaica. And we were concerned that some of our older customers, our older members would have resisted. But they loved it even more than the young people, right? Because they love the VM and they want to see VM moving forward. And so that has landed very well. And one big thing we wanted to communicate from that, as I said, is that these other products that we offer in wealth management and pensions and so on were offered by the same VM that you have loved over the years. And so that has landed well for us and has helped those businesses to increase their market share and grow as well. And then the final transformation journey is our organizational structure. And we have needed the support of the Bank of Jamaica for this, because the Banking Services Act requires that we, if you have several regulated financial entities in a group with a deposit-taking institution, they need to establish a financial holding company. And so we have done that. VM Financial Group has been established, and the ultimate parent is the VM Group. We did that in February of 2023, and so we have a non-financial side and a financial group. But we have had to communicate that in clear ways to our team members and to our members and clients. So those transformation journeys have landed well, we believe, and it has helped us to rethink, reawaken the giant, and to grow our member base, our active member base, from 300,000 to now over 500,000, right? In a fairly short period of time. But we have more to pursue, because we now have to transform the efficiency of the organization to ensure that we're more resilient for the future. So we're paying attention to our cost-to-income ratio and hoping to better leverage the digital platforms that we have implemented to make the organization more efficient and ready to serve the members and clients, those who have not even been born as yet, because we want to be around for another 147 years. And then the other thing that we want to transform too is our culture. We want to keep working on that, because we have defined our culture as one that should reflect ownership, and we call it Own Up. Teamwork, we call it Team Up. Care, we call that Care Up. And high performance, we call that Level Up. So Own Up, Team Up, Care Up, and Level Up. That's how we define our culture. And we want that young people who join VM, well, if you engage them in an interview for feedback on how they feel about this institution, we want those young people to be able to declare that yes, VM is a high performance institution, one that reflects ownership, strong accountability, great teamwork. We care for each other and for our members and clients, and that we're always improving. That's what we would want our people to say. So I will close by sharing a few steps that I think are important in that exercise then. Firstly, I think it's important to ensure that when we're leading change, that people understand the purpose of the organization. Many of us we are working with a team and we don't even understand the reason for its existence. And the same thing happened in VM. When I got there, we had to remind them of why this organization was founded in 1878. Why some clergymen came together and felt that 13 years after the Morant Bay Rebellion, it was important that an institution owned by the people helped others to acquire their own property. And we have to do that, because we have to help people to connect with their why. And especially young people want to be purpose-driven, right? So we want to ensure that that is important. So what we do is to ensure that there is a framework that helps people to understand why you were founded, but also what are the current gaps and how you're going to close those gaps, because that is the burning platform. That is a sense of urgency that you need to create. And they engage a senior team now to agree the vision that is transformative for VM and potentially for Jamaica. So the second thing is communication. So the first thing is purpose. I'm not giving you 8 steps. I'm just giving you 4 points to remember. First thing is the purpose and communicating around that and building in the burning platform and that. The second thing is communication. Listen to all voices. Listen to all voices. I intentionally myself engage a wide range of voices via organized visits to customers. I have booked days, solid days, right through to December to visit customers. Because I want at least 1 day per week. Because I need to hear from what the customers are saying myself. And if you follow our diary, we'll never have time to do that. So it has to be blocked out. But customers, members and clients in all markets. I was in the UK last week listening to the members there, right? But I have an annual listening tour to all the team members in small groups, hearing from them. And in recent years, I've been accompanied by other executives on a rostered basis. And the teams prepare their presentations and share with me what's happening. And they give us questions and suggestions, and we'll go away to work on those and report back to them on what the leaders are saying. And we have quarterly meetings with all the managers and the annual business conference and digital town halls and so on. But the point is that we must remain humble enough to be both teacher and leader or student and follower at the same time. You got that? All right, the third thing is investment. We need to be clear about how we're going to invest in sometimes facilitators, like how we have used EY, but also what technology you're going to use, what time you're going to commit to driving certain change initiatives, because for people to understand, you have to spend time with them to take them through what we're planning to do. It takes time, so we have to organize that. It takes energy. So it's not only money, it takes time and energy. And we have to be intentional about that investment. And then finally, resilience. Resilience is important. We have to build in bounce-back capability. You have to ensure that we're monitoring closely and ensuring that we can do quick course correction, because things will not always go according to plan. And things will go off track. And the psychologists tell us that, a combination of factors contribute to resilience. Firstly, we have to invest in building caring and supportive relationships within and outside your own family and within the team. We have to remain optimistic and avoid seeing crises as insurmountable problems. And we have to keep moving towards our goals. Develop some realistic, short-term goals and do something regularly, even if it seems like just a small accomplishment that will keep you moving towards your goals. And the truth is that in this change process, there will be naysayers. True? Some people will discourage you, and some people will come with lots of negativity and cast. Sometimes it's their own fears that they are casting on you. And that's okay. You should expect that, because people come from different places, right? And some will question your motives, and some will simply even doubt your ability. But when this happens, do not be distracted. You're going to keep focused on the goal. And then finally, in this change process, failure is another risk that you will face. Expect failure and overcome it. The most successful persons have experienced more bad luck and failure than the less successful. Do you believe that? Because they have taken more risks. And they have failed more, but they get up again. They don't stall. They fail sometimes, they keep moving forward. I love Michael Jordan's quote. From my generation, some of you only know about the youngsters. But my generation, it was Michael Jordan. Right? Michael Jordan says, I've missed more than 9,000 shots in my career. I've lost almost 300 games. 26 times I've been trusted to take the game-winning shot and missed. I've failed over and over again in my life, and that is why I succeed. So, friends, I hope that you have heard something this morning that you will find helpful in your role as change evangelists. As I said at the start, the nation depends heavily on the work that you do. Be encouraged, be determined, be relentless in your pursuit of a better Jamaica for all of us. Thank you very much.
Courtney Campbell, ladies and gentlemen. Told you we could call him an evangelist, but then we also learned we could call him the school principal, because you were all called upon to remember your national pledge. Did you all remember it? Okay, I heard some mistakes, but I'll forgive you, right? But also, Courtney Campbell, inspiring speaker, team leader, constant learner, CEO. Thank you so much for your perspective from the private sector with such powerful examples. And now we know why VM is so resilient. I'll give you one little joke from my two littles with resilience. My son is 4.5, and the TIU team knows that last year I had a bad injury to my ankle and my knee. And my son told me, Mommy, when I get bigger, I'm going to have abs. So I keep exercising because I'm also not going to have a bad knee like you. VM does not have a bad knee at 100 and what? 147 years old. Of course, I told my son, you can only wish to get to my age. Keep growing. But the other thing I like is this idea of being familiar with failure. In early learning, we talk about familiarity with error. And just last night, I had the conversation again with Alexander about how failure helps the neurons to grow. And it is the same with managing change. We can't get resilient if we don't try and fail and learn from it to improve. And that's one of the things I hope we take away. So even if our first reaction was, I'm a little resistant, I'm a little cautious, maybe let's take one step with the change management playbook. Because now you have tools that help you not fail, or, said another way, to fail better or fail forward, right? You have the tools. Ladies and gentlemen, it has been such an inspiring morning so far. Don't you agree? Good. And so now that we've been fed on the ideas of resilience, we have learned to expect failure and overcome it. We've been encouraged in optimism to maintain the relationships and to have that constant movement toward the goals. We will take some time now to have some constant movement towards coffee. So we're going to take a short coffee break. Please enjoy some refreshments, and we'll invite you back in a half an hour for an exciting discussion on leading effective change. Before you move, though, during the coffee break, I want to invite you to interact with the playbook. There are 2 screens in the room that you can visit, and I want you to start engaging with the material. If you have not seen the material before today, you should have something to contribute when we come back to the panel discussion. You should have a thought, a question, something to share. And there are people in the room who have been interacting with and using the material. So talk to them to build those relationships over coffee, and I'll see you in 30 minutes. Welcome back, everyone. Welcome back, welcome back. I hope you all had a chance to refuel. And as the last few of us take our time to get our seats, I hope you do so with a brisk walk, because we're ready to dive into a key activity of today's launch, and that is our panel discussion. Now, this discussion will explore what it truly takes to lead change. Your moderator is Change Management Specialist Dwayne Dillon, and the panel brings together distinguished leaders with first-hand experience of driving transformation. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together. Welcome our panel. And over to you, Dwayne.
Thank you very much, Master of Ceremonies. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning,
Good
sir.
morning.
It doesn't sound like we had a little coffee break, right? Let's try again. Good morning, everyone.
How are you doing?
All right. Much better, much better. I'm Dwayne Dillon, and I'm Change Specialist, but today I'm the moderator and we're going to be having a lively discussion around, the practicality of this methodology, this toolkit, and how it works for you. So all the questions that you have, make sure we can hear it today, because when you go back to your offices, we want to know that you have a good understanding. And I see a lot of familiar faces, so I know you are very much intrigued and know a lot of these things before. And I also see some persons who were engaged with the monitors. So I'm sure there'll be a lot of questions coming from there. Now, my panelists today is Cherian Joseph, who's team lead for the Change Management Office at the Transformation Implementation Unit.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Ambassador Underwood, of course, she's also CEO for Underwood Consulting, right? And of course, we have none other than our guest speaker, who needs no more introduction, but give them a round of applause for me, please. Now we're going to start with some opening remarks, starting with Cherian, that will focus on the methodology. So for those who need a little bit more information, listen keenly.
Thank you, Dwayne. Good morning, everyone. As Dwayne said, I'm going to just focus briefly on the methodology. Everybody who has come up here today has spoken about change. And when we did the Menti earlier, you saw that people had a number of reactions to change. Some people were excited. I was one of the excited ones. Some were apprehensive. Some people were curious. And the issue that we're all facing is that fundamentally in the Caribbean and for developing nations, we're standing at a crossroads. We have to choose between growth and stagnation. The environment in which we are operating is moving and changing very rapidly. And it's becoming more and more clear, and I hope it's becoming clear to you who are here also today, that change is not just an option anymore. It's a necessity. We cannot afford not to change. And today we're just going to talk about the methodology which EY and TIU working together have created as the guide and the pathway for transformation in the public sector. Peter Drucker said a long time ago that culture eats strategy for breakfast. Anybody knows that quote?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And it is critically important to understand what he meant was that people could come up with all sorts of wonderful policies and systems and strategies and all the rest of it, but the organization and how the organization operates will ensure that if the organization decides that the strategy is not going to be implemented, it's not going to be implemented. Because the cultures and the way the organization operates and does things supersedes anything else and any choices that the organization makes. Now, many organizations engage in transformation efforts. I'm from Trinidad and Tobago. Trinidad has gone through a number of transformation initiatives. Jamaica has gone through a number of transformation initiatives. And what is becoming increasingly clear, and what has become paramount and clear to the government of Jamaica, is that change management and transformation demands a formal methodology. You can't just say, well, let's change, and it happens. It doesn't happen like that. And while every change journey is different, a lot of change initiatives, a lot of projects that are implemented are not successful because once the project moves beyond conceptualization, as it were, people don't know what to do. And the government of Jamaica, in its wisdom, and it is singular in the Caribbean for this, has recognized that the strategy is not the only thing that's necessary for success, and that it's important that there is a formal methodology in place to say, how do you get from strategy to embedded transformation within the organization? And this is the origin of the GOJ 8-step methodology. The methodology is purposeful, it's transparent, it's insightful, it's personalized, and it emphasizes collaboration amongst all of the agencies as well as the members of the agency. And what are the 8 steps? You start with why change, and Ms. Mullings mentioned it in her presentation on CPFSA, and she said why change was exciting, because you need to fundamentally understand why you're changing. You need to the second step is to understand the needs of the organization. Okay, we know why we want to change now. What are the needs? We need to understand the nature of the change. We need to co-create the future, working collaboratively, utilizing extensive communication amongst members of the agencies. You want to ensure that it's aligned so everybody knows where we're going. Everybody knows we're together where we're going. The organization has to be prepared. You have to build capacity in the organization. And then, of course, and Mr. Campbell calls it resilience. We call it sustaining the change, because a lot of times when you don't have a formal way and a formal pathway for change, you do engage in change, things do transform, and then you get stuck there for 10, 15, 20 years. So you need to sustain the change, and you need to embed the change management methodology and an appreciation for change and a welcoming of change in the organization as we move forward. So you need to start with why, then you need to go with what. But the how and the methodology for implementing that is critically important. And one of the things I want to mention briefly before I close is that don't underestimate the power of storytelling. Storytelling can enhance acceptance of transformation. Facts and figures will tell people where you are. They can inform, but stories can inspire. And I don't know if you listened to Ms. Mullings this morning, but her story was inspiring. It gave us a great appreciation for how she could implement, she was able to implement the transformation in her organization and what were the elements for that success. So, in closing, the case for change is not about disruption for its own sake. It's about growth, resilience, and the courage to challenge the status quo. In the Caribbean, the public sector is one of the critical agencies that transforms countries. In developed countries, you have a number of agencies that can do that, both private and public sector, but in the developing countries, the public sector is a critical agency, is a critical partner in supporting transformation. And that is why it's important that we have a formal methodology, we embrace change, and we implement it. So, as we take this journey together, let us commit to building a case for change that inspires action, it ignites passion, and paves the way for progress. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Now, Ambassador Underwood, just give us your opening remarks, focusing in on resistance and resistance management.
All right, thank you very much for the opportunity. So, resistance to change is not a glitch, it's a core element within the process of managing change. So we know it's coming. Rather than being reactionary, we have to anticipate the change and be prepared to navigate the change. The struggle is real, but the good news is that the solutions are also real. In order for us to navigate change successfully, we need to be able to understand the source of the change. Because just as in healthcare, you cannot give a prescription unless you understand what the actual process of illness is, it's the same with managing resistance, because all resistance is not the same. The typical sources of resistance include fear of the unknown. We also have change fatigue that can stimulate some resistance. There may be fear of the loss of power or autonomy as a result of the change. So, for example, if I've been a public servant for, decades, and I've established that I'm the go-to person within this system, and now you're going to change the system, so that can be a source of resistance. Past negative experiences, especially when we have not acknowledged that the change didn't go as planned. So it begins with listening to understand what is causing the resistance. There's a temptation to try and hold the resistors at bay, to marginalize them, to silence them. And that's a mistake. Rather, we need to invite the dissenters in and to listen attentively, because we can then respond to what we are hearing. And I'll share with you an example from the Barbados context. The government was introducing a new national identification card called the Trident card. This was to replace the mandatory card which had been in place from 1969. However, it was marketed, it was publicized as a digital ID, and the conspiracy theorists went to work. Government was going to track you. They were going to be able to lock you out from your money. And because it was mandatory, the law requires every national to have an ID card. So it was a big uproar. Now, the government could have ignored the resistance, but rather they invited except for the really out there conspiracy theorists, invited the others in and then made adjustments based on the concerns that were expressed. So, for example, rather than making the digital component mandatory, that became optional. So if you're afraid that the government was going to be tracking your every move, you could opt out of that feature. And based on listening to the objections and the resistance, the government was able to make adjustments, and implementation was then able to proceed. So some strategies, I've just outlined one in terms of the importance of listening actively, taking the feedback on board. It's also important to realize that it cannot be a one-size-fits-all approach. We've heard repeatedly this morning about the importance of communication. I can guarantee you one thing you won't have people say as you lead them through a major change initiative is that you communicated too much. So no matter how much you think you're communicating, communicate some more. The other thing is that it's important to focus on the content of the message as well as the messenger. For organizations to successfully go through change, the individuals within the organization have to go through change. So organizations don't change without the individuals changing. And that change begins with, we heard it this morning, with a change in mindset. And we don't all come to the table with the same mindset. And so the message has to be tailored and informed by comprehensive stakeholder analysis so that you understand where your stakeholders are, what are their attitudes towards the proposed change, what are their specific concerns, and that then will inform the content of your messaging. But the messenger is also important because certain messages are best received from certain individuals. And what the research done by ProSci has shown is that when it comes to the big picture messages, people prefer to get those messages from the head. So we would have, for example, Courtney giving the big picture messages in terms of how is this going to affect the organization writ large. But when it comes to messages about how this change is going to affect me, the research has shown that people prefer to get those messages from their line managers because those are the ones who interact with them on a more regular basis, who understand what they do within the organization. So in terms of messaging to help counteract resistance, those close messages should come from the persons who are closest to the individuals who are experiencing the concern, the resistance, the fear. And, you know, there's so much we can talk about in terms of resistance. I've already been cautioned that I'm likely to get several questions, but I look forward to having a fulsome conversation with you and my colleagues here as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And finally, Sir Campbell to talk to us about adapting and adopting to change.
Yeah, thank you very much, and great to be on this panel with you. I think, first of all, the whole matter of agility is important because speed is a competitive advantage, right? And the world isn't going to wait on us. Jack Welch said, if the pace of change outside the organization is greater than the rate of change internally, the end is near. You got that?
Yeah.
Pace of change on the outside greater than the pace of change on the inside, the end is near. So we have to ensure that we're keeping on track with the external changes. We have to monitor those clearly. How do we do that? Continuous environmental scanning, listening to your stakeholders, being intentional in how you hear from the people you serve, the customers you serve, the regulators, if you are regulated, from your team members, because they are also in touch with external customers. But all your stakeholders need to have a voice, and that voice needs to be respected. Sometimes I won't say things in the way that you'd like to hear, but you have to respect that voice. And you know, we do surveys. A lot of organizations do customer service surveys and put them on the shelf. You know, we have to ensure that you're understanding the trends, not just looking at the statistics, but going to the actual comments to understand some of the, because when people take time to type a comment, it means they feel passionately about it. So you want to be paying attention to that. The second thing then is, so the first point is listening and listening to all the stakeholders. The second thing is to have a robust process to assimilate that feedback because it's coming from all over. And how do you put it all together in a way that makes sense for people to be able to develop action plans from those insights? And then you want to put yourself in a position to track the progress of the responses. If it's a new product that they've asked for, who will develop that product? If it's a service change, who will take responsibility for that? And where in the organization is that to be tracked? All of those details are important, or else it's very easy, because so many things are happening, very easy for good things to slip through the cracks. So we have to be very intentional in ensuring that we have full coverage for all of these major items of feedback. The other thing you want to do is to ensure that the teams are equipped via structure and training to respond. So most big problems can't be solved by one team member, or by one unit in the organization. It's important to establish cross-functional teams. In fact, up to yesterday, I was speaking to my executive team on retreat and say, you know what we need now? Partnerships. Just as you have law firms and architectural firms, engineering firms, with everybody having joint and several liability, joint and several responsibility. That's what I want to see in the organization, that we have partnerships to solve particular problems. And by the partnership, I mean these cross-functional teams. We, many years ago, introduced agile methodology. I'm sure you're familiar with it. We're all trained on it. Some of the agile projects have gone well. Some haven't gone so well. They're far from agile as far as I'm concerned. But that's the nature of the thing. You know, we have to then learn why haven't those gone well, and we then seek to have that continuous improvement. Because at the end of the day, we know that we will have failures, things not going as well as we want to. We have to learn very quickly from those, fix the gaps, and then improve. So that's how the organization will have a continuous improvement process. The graph upwards is not a straight line like that. It's like this, right? In ours, a failure or a problem, a gap, a quick recovery, and start to climb again. Another gap, quick recovery, you start to climb again. So it's not a straight line. Mm-hmm. And we should expect those gaps as we go on now. And the final thing I would say is that we'd want to embed risk management in everything we do. In a business plan, in a product launch, in a change, in an organizational change. Do the work of identifying the risks to which this process will be exposed, and work through the mitigants with the team, so that, you know, as you monitor the implementation, you actually have a response to some of those risks as they emerge, and many of them will emerge. And actually, what I've found is that the better prepared you are for the potential risk exposures, is sometimes less likely that they'll emerge, because you have kind of put the mitigants in place already. Yeah? So.
Thank you very much.
Good.
All right, so, Chair, and whet your appetite as it relates to the GOJ 8 steps, and a lot of focus on the why, why change, and that case for change. Ambassador spoke a lot about, the managing the resistance and why resistance, and a lot of it has to do with the communication. You can't communicate too much, communicate. And Sir Campbell, he really gave you insights as to the external environment and how things are changing, and if the pace of what is happening externally is faster than what's inside. And he told you the rest. Right? So that's very telling. And of course, the importance of teams. Change is done by a team, not a one-person job. And so, you all have to come together. And throughout that, you try to manage the process using a risk management approach. Now, we have many organizations across the GOJ here. And it's one thing I know is that every single one of you are going through some form of change. True or false? Wow. I guess nobody can talk about change fatigue anymore, right? Right? So we want to hear from you. And, what are your burning questions? What are some of your issues? And how you think those can be resolved? We have an esteemed panel here who can, help to guide and assist. So let us hear from you, within your own organization. One of the things we always say to persons is that even this change management approach, it is something that can be done in your personal life. It is very applicable to your personal life. So let us hear from you. I think we have roving mic, so we have a question right over here.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Kevin Brown, UTech. Well, let me just first of all thank the TIU for this event. It's been amazing so far. We're going through a lot of change at UTech, but my question is, transformation doesn't come for free. And so I don't know if anyone has any advice on how to transform an organization when money is tight.
That's a very good one, thank you. Which one of my panelists would like to take that on? Ambassador?
No, I think, let me take the first stab at that. Because money is tight everywhere. I think, first of all, we have to agree the burning platform. The case for change, right? Why can't we live in this room anymore, right? And so all of us need to agree on that. I think if the leadership team comes together and are united in that case for change, then the question is, what is a change? What is a new UTech or the new dispensation that we want? The resources will probably determine the pace and the scope of the change, right? So, and how things are prioritized. Because even in VM, we have a project management office that has limited bandwidth. And we would want to implement 20 projects or over a period of a year, because those are in high demand from our customers and from our staff. But we get the sobering reminder from the project management team that our capacity, we can only do X projects per year if we're going to do them properly, right? And then so you have that resource, and then you have the whole matter of the capital expenditure that we place a cap on as well. So as a result, then we decide to prioritize. So we have the same team coming together to agree a prioritization matrix. How we're going to score these projects, impact on customer, impact on the cost-to-income ratio, that's important. Regulatory issues, if the BOJ wants it, then it gets lit up, right? Right? But so we have some criteria to determine the prioritization, and people vote on it, and then we all decide to live with that priority order. As a result, unfortunately, some projects keep falling down to number 8 or 9 every year. And the project owners so frustrated they keep having to put it back every year. When we do it, eventually one day they will move up a little. But I'm just telling you that there's a downside to that, but that's what you have to do. You have to make choices. And no is an important word, and not no is another important phrase that we have to get comfortable with. Yep?
Yeah. I just want to add, and I'm referring to the methodology, of course. As Courtney had said, you need to understand why you're changing. And when you're building the case for change, you need to have a coalition of persons who can be your executive, who can be the change makers in your organization, that themselves understand why the change needs to happen in the context of what would happen to the organization if the change does not happen. Because this is critical to understand. Yes, there may be multiple priorities. Yes, there are finite resources. All funds are not going to be able to do everything. But the governing coalition needs to understand from the Coalition for Change that if the change does not happen, A, B, C will happen, and it will cost D, E, F. So it's critical to get the Coalition for Change. And when you understand why you're changing, you have to link it to the needs of your organization. What are the needs for the organization? How are you going to grow? Which direction are you going to grow? What's going to happen to the organization if it does not grow? Or if it chooses to deprioritize the area that you think will bring the most benefits to the organization. And then you need to understand what the impact on the organization will be. And I agree with what Courtney said. Risk management needs to be a part of everything within the organization. What is the risk of not changing? What is the value from a fiscal point of view and a human resources point of view of not changing? What is the risk of not changing? What is the cost of not changing? And then that will build the entire case, which you can then present to the coalition of governors, and you can tell them, listen, these are the things that we've identified. These are the priorities that we've identified in the critical order. We recognize that we have financial constraints. We recognize that we can't get everything that we want. However, if we don't get A, B, C, D, what will happen in the organization is this and this and this. And it will cost the organization this amount of money. It might cost the organization people, because people will say, well, listen, I'm here for this project, and it's never implementing. Every year we get deprioritized, I'm gone. So you're losing resources in terms of people. You're losing commitment and excellence. And you're building the dreaded change fatigue when things keep not happening, as it were.
I'd just like to build and to reinforce what we've heard from my two colleagues on the panel here. And the transparency that we heard about from Courtney this morning comes into play again, because we have finite resources. That's a reality. However, the process for prioritizing interventions need to be very transparent, so that if a project is not making the pass, that people can see objectively why that is. And it's important for us to be clear in articulating the difference between a nice to have and a need to have. That's right. And in assessing the objective criteria that I'm referencing, I think it's important for us to look at both the nature of the change as well as the readiness to engage in the change. And it's by bringing those two assessments together, we can then see the feasibility of proceeding with a given change at a given point in time.
Very well. Thank you very much. Question right there. Oh, my ED.
Oh, yes. I'm happy to say that I don't know everything. So, what happens when the case for change changes? So you've built this program on this case that we have to do these things now. And you start and you've stabilized. And everybody's like, okay, so 2 years ago, we were going to fall off a cliff. Today, we're about 10 steps away from the cliff. So we're okay now, we can relax a little. So the case that you built has changed. What happens at that point?
Okay, well, I suppose the start for that has to be building the organization. While you're building and you're engaging in transformation, you need to also be building resilience and agility in the organization, so that the organization is able to pivot and to transform and to change direction when the external environment changes. I'm sure everybody knows PESTLE, P-E-S-T-L-E, political, economic, social, technological, legal, environmental. And increasingly, right now, we're looking at media, informatics, and demographics. Right? So it's now PESTLE mid. And organizations that become somewhat stagnant cannot pivot as easily and as quickly as organizations where you build that resilience into the organization. So you need to be having the same conversations that we've been talking about repeatedly. You're constantly having conversations about what's happening in the external environment and the impact it's likely to have within the organization or the project that will need the organization to pivot. So you're building resilience in the organization to pivot. You're having continuous communications about what's happening internal to the organization, external to the organization. And you're communicating so that people within the organization and the coalition, I'm always talking about coalitions within the organization, are aware of these changes. So they know that things are changing. It might be government funding, it might be the strategic direction, it might be strategy, it might be people. So that they are aware consistently and that they can pivot. And communication is the foundation for all of that, as well as building a coalition of people committed to transform, to transformation, and who are agile and able to move as the environment changes. And in a lot of older organizations, organizations that have existed a long time, people become, and I mean, we are working with the public sector. A lot of people in the public sector say, but we've always done it like that. We've done it like that for 30 years and everybody's happy, right? And it means that the conversations about the external environment and what's changing have not been happening. And if you have conversations with some of these same public servants about what has changed in their life, they will say, well, you know, the currency keeps changing and this, they are aware of the changes, but they're not relating those to the organization and what's happening and what could prompt changes within the organization. So communication, agility, and responsiveness.
If I could add to that, there are three things that I'd love to mention here. And the first one goes back to the Carter model when he talks about bringing the outside in. We cannot operate with navel gazing when we're just so focused on what's happening internally that we're oblivious to what's happening in the external environment. So that has to be an ongoing process. Secondly, we're operating in a VUCA environment. It's volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. So things are not static. So we have to take that into consideration throughout the process. And then coming back to the risk register that Courtney would have mentioned earlier, that's a living, breathing document that needs to be constantly updated. So you need to be constantly monitoring and evaluating both your internal environment and your external environment, and updating your risk register so that you don't get caught flat-footed, but that you're agile and you're resistant. I've always had a visceral, response to the Lewin's model of change, where they tell you about it's frozen, so you unfreeze, change, and refreeze. Yeah. I'm like, that's madness. You can't freeze because things are happening too quickly. Right? So being agile, being resilient, I think is a more practical and effective approach to leading change.
Yeah, I just said ditto, and just to add one Turkish proverb. Turkish proverb says, no matter how far you've gone down the wrong road, turn back.
Thank you for that.
Good afternoon, Shara Watson from the Scientific Research Council. Many of us here might be heads of agencies that we went into and inherited a leadership team, because of course we're not doing it alone, we can't do it alone. What would be your advice to us as now helm of these organizations that might have been around for many decades, and you're coming in and now smelling whatever fragrance that they are now immune to, and recognizing the need for change, and you have a leadership team who is in a system, in a culture that has served them very well, and might not smell the same fragrance you're smelling, or recognize the same need for change. What would be your advice to us leaders to galvanize that team around that need, that why? Because that is where most of us have the biggest challenge. We cannot have the change on our own. We need that core leadership team that is in more direct contact with the rest of the team. What are the tools, what are the advice, what are the experiences you have had to help get that that force, that critical mass to lead that change with you?
Thank you. Who want to take that?
Somebody else go first.
Ambassador?
All right, so I'll take a first go at this because it could fall under the resistance banner.
Right.
And so, you know that station WIIFM? What's in it for me? Right? And remember, I mentioned that one of the sources of resistance was fear of the unknown, fear of loss of power and autonomy. And so in making the case for change with those who have been in the system and have a vested interest in the perpetuation of the status quo, we still need to be able to answer the what's in it for me. And that might be not just what could happen positively, but what are the consequences of not changing? And we got a quotation from Courtney afterwards, because if you're not changing, but everything around you is changing, then that's the way to become obsolete, to become unalive as an organization. So addressing in a very direct way what they stand to gain from engaging in the change is something that's important to have. And at the same time, it's important to bring empathy to the table, because in terms of the emotional response to change, the research has shown that we respond to change the same way, that it's the same emotions as in the grieving cycle. So you may have the shock and the frustration and the denial and the anger and the bargaining, all of that before we get to acceptance. So it's important to acknowledge that there are real emotions tied up in these persons may have given, their life and several productive years towards creating this. So it's important to approach it with empathy. I was involved in a major transformation initiative, which included a rebranding, renaming of a particular government agency in Barbados. And I remember we were having a forum where members of staff from all levels were present, and a youngster got up and said, let's have a funeral for the name of the old department. And there was some excitement involved, but I also saw the pain in the faces of people who had given their productive lives to create, and now you're going to just bury us and we're sitting here, you're planning our funeral. So bringing some empathy to the table is really important, where we take the time to understand what the concerns, the reservations are, and then from that position of understanding, look to move forward.
I want to add to that I have come into organizations where I am the newcomer. I've also been in organizations where I've been the youngest. I'm not the youngest anymore, but I used to be the youngest. Right? And one of the things that I learned over the course of my career is you need to subordinate yourself. When you come into an organization and you're new, you need to subordinate yourself. You don't come in on day one and talk about how bad the organization is or how it needs to change and all the rest of it. You need to subordinate yourself, and you need to talk to all the individuals on your team and get where they are coming from. When you come into an organization, especially for transformation, it's not initially about you. It's about the people. Transformation happens here first, inside people first. They need to understand first. But as the leader or as the person mandated to lead the change, you need to subordinate yourself, use empathy, have conversations with people, find out where they are coming from before you share with them where you are coming from. When I came into the TIU, I came in, and I hope that was a masterclass in subordination because I came into the TIU after the amazing Dr. Mavia Evangelista had passed away. And she's an incredibly tough act to follow. And you can't come in and immediately start changing things, which I didn't, right? You have to come in, subordinate yourself. I went into Caribbean Airlines went through the same thing that ambassador spoke about. And so when we transformed from British West Indian Airways to Caribbean Airlines, a lot of the people who were with BW continued to be with CAL. And the pain these people had. I was in the project management office. They brought me in to set up the project management, the PMO system. And there were some people who were so difficult. So I became the people whisperer. And I would go to these people, and you have to have conversations with these people, and you need to listen. It's about communication, but it's about subordinating yourself and listening. And I used to actually tell people, listen, I'm a blithering idiot. I don't know your job because you don't. You just came in. I don't know your organization. Treat me like a blithering idiot and tell me where this organization is coming from. Tell me where you're coming from. Tell me about you in the context of this organization. And you have to get people talking. But more importantly, you have to get yourself listening. In the beginning of transmission, it's not about you. It's about them. It's about how they feel. It's about what they want. It's about how they think about the organization. And people are very invested in their organizations. When CAL came about and when they were changing, people were weeping because they were so committed to the organization. You cannot move people from a state of deep grief into immediate action. You have to recognize, acknowledge the grief, ask the people how they need you to support them, and then implement the transformation.
Yeah, so the only thing I would add, 2 good contributions. So I'll be brief then, because I agree with everything that has been said. That situation you outlined, I think, is very common. And sometimes among those are situations in which some of the people you will now lead were also contenders for your role.
Yes.
And so you have all of that mixed up there. Except my own situation, I was brought in from the outside into VM. There are other people there who had been interviewed, but you know, I engaged them in the process. The way I would say it works to overcome some of that resistance is to ensure that you have a process, an intentional strategic planning process that benefits from feedback from a broad cross-section of people, not just the immediate group, to ensure that all the team members have an opportunity to put their voice into the mix. What is great about the organization, what needs to change, what opportunities they're seeing, so everybody has an opportunity. You're going to find that when that broader set of voices, when that feedback is brought to the table, then it tends to break down the resistance, because now it's a wider group that we're hearing from. So that's the first thing I would say. Engage the wider team, and then use those same people now, that immediate circle, along with a few new faces from among the team, people who didn't have any power before, that you're going to use the opportunity to elevate, because one of your jobs is to find some new stars as you build this guiding coalition and bring those new voices into this visioning process and agreeing new strategic goals and new mission and initiatives and so on, and set some standards there that will be applicable, and new teams to kind of work on those. And I find that worked for me in terms of ensuring that the entire team got excited about where we're going. Yeah?
Okay. Thank you very much. Mr. Jones.
Thank you, moderator. Good afternoon, all. I'm Wayne Jones from the Ministry of Finance and Public Service. Of course, our focus is on the public sector, and we have a peculiar reality where we have the political administrative dilemma, some would say. So my question is really seeking some insight into how do we seek to insulate the derailment of a change process from that dilemma of politics and administration.
I'm the least qualified to answer that.
Let me start with Chair.
Yes.
But I'll attempt an answer after the two.
I think,
Yeah.
I think the fact of the matter is we cannot isolate the organization from the political changes that will take place. This is the reality of life.
Yeah.
Things change. It might be 4 years. It might be 5 years. Fundamental transformation is continuous. So again, I go back to what I said earlier. It's not so much the freaking out when the change happens. It's building the ability of the organization to pivot when changes in policy takes place. New governments have their own priorities. They have their own policies. They have their own strategic directions, right? And we, as leaders in the public sector, need to work with our organization so that they can become agile and adaptive and aware of what's happening on the outside of the organization. Because it's not like when a political party comes into power, it's not like they haven't been saying the same thing all the time they've been out there, eh? It's just that we've not been paying attention. So as leaders of the organization, what you have to do is to build agility within the organization and the ability in the organization to pivot and to change. And the ability of the organization at the executive level, at the middle management level, at all levels, to say, hey, from the same pestle mid I was talking about earlier, the external environment, this is happening in the external environment. What would happen if, when Shell, I don't know if you are aware of the concept of scenario planning. When the first time we had major issues and disruption in oil, Shell was one of the companies that succeeded. And the reason that they were able to pivot, as it were, is because they did something that later became scenario planning. So a group of the executive got together and they were like, well, if this happens, what will we do, boy? So they had these conversations throughout the organization. So when one of the changes actually happened, they were able to say, we talked about this, we could do A, B, C, and D. Right? So you have to build agility into the organization. You have to have, again, we keep coming back to conversations and communication. You have to communicate about what's happening in the external environment. You have to bring awareness of the external environment into the organization so the organization can pivot. And you also need to let people get a clue that change is happening, change is continuous, and different political parties have different priorities. And the public servants who serve the public need to consistently recognize that different political parties have different orientations. And we need to ensure that our staff, our people, are aware of those orientations and what could happen. Also, we all need to have our elevator speech ready. Because when a new minister comes into the organization and the new minister is about to pivot, your role is to embrace the new vision in the context of the transformation you're already engaging in. Your role is to say, so you start with, absolutely, that's a brilliant idea. And you know how we could do this? And integrate the transformation you're already going through into fulfilling the vision of the new person. So that way, you're not completely canceling all the transformation efforts that you will have engaged in before, but you're adapting them in an agile manner to support the new vision.
Yeah. So my thought is very similar in terms of insulating. To be honest with you, as just a member of the public, I'd love Jamaica to get to the point where it kind of don't matter who the policymakers are, because our institutions are so strong, staffed by people, I don't know their politics, but they're just very professional. And they're running good schools and great hospitals, and tax service is great, and the police station is well run. It doesn't matter who is, and then I'll go and vote. But that really doesn't materially change our lives, right? And that's where we really need to get to. The public servants, I was just in the UK the other day, the public servants there kind of don't matter whether it is, who's the new Prime Minister? Keir Starmer, or whoever it is, you understand? So we'd love to get to that point, but probably not there as yet. But here's the point that we're at though. Strong public institutions and great change management is good for the policymakers. And policymakers who are new in government is good for them as well, because they will have a shorter time to implementation because of great change management. So if Jamaica, for example, were to have a change of government at the next election, then I think the change management methodology that we are talking about here would be good for those new ministers, because they would have a shorter time to seeing impact. Yes. On their part. They want to see impact so that they can have something to talk about in the next 5 years. So if you think about it, that's all they want to do, have a good story. So the third point I would make is that I think the best way to insulate yourself as a public servant is to focus on the customer. The people, the stakeholders who are to be served. If they are served well, if you have a good mechanism for hearing from them, for sharing updates with them, for improving service delivery, that is the best insulation, I think. Just speaking as a member of the public. Yeah.
Several years ago, I was the regional project manager for the Caribbean Leadership Project, funded by the Canadian government, and we provided leadership development programming for senior civil servants. And there came a point in time where one of the members said to me, "Joan, why don't you have a module leading from under the bus?" And of course, the chuckle went through the room, and they said, because the politicians always throwing us under the bus, so we might as well stay under there and lead from there. So here's the thing. Beginning with the end in mind is extremely important. And so the change initiatives coming back with the purpose and the compelling why. Our change initiative should be in alignment with our national development agenda. Different political parties may have different ideas about how to execute, how to implement on that national development agenda. However, by being aware of what the priorities are as articulated by the different parties, you can position yourself to be an advocate, to make a compelling case for pursuing the initiatives. But self-awareness is the beginning of wisdom, and it's important for us as leaders within the public service to be honest with ourselves and to engage in introspection, right? Because what is political interference versus what is a new political directorate exercising its mandate? And sometimes we blur the lines and we categorize things as one when it's actually something else.
True.
I had a permanent secretary report to me, again under the Caribbean Leadership Project, that she had disciplined a member of staff, and she was sharing the story with me, thinking that I would be supportive of what she had done. Here's what she had done. It was coming up to general elections in her country, and she saw a member of staff with the opposition manifesto on her desk. And she disciplined the individual. And I said to her, do you realize that that opposition manifesto could have become the agenda based on the results of the general elections? So she should be reading it to see what it is that this government in waiting has as its agenda. Now, in the Canadian system, they formalized this because the Canadian Public Service, they actually review the manifestos of the major parties to see what, and they prepare a document based on if in fact this is the new administration, this is likely to be what our action agenda would be.
Yeah, I really want to support that, because at the end of the day, if we respect our democracy, then the people's voice, has to be respected, and therefore the change management methodology really has to be engaged to facilitate implementation of that policy, of those policies.
Indeed, indeed. We have another question from the audience.
Yes, good day. So my question is on culture, and I want to know, well, culture. Okay, so culture is hinged on a number of things, including leadership. So how can we keep top management on the ball where leadership is concerned? Sometimes the own up and the care up, as Mr. Campbell shared earlier, can get overtaken by the demands of operations, and the activities may deemed more immediate, more critical. So how do we keep them, we get them to keep certain philosophies on leadership at the fore, so that as we transform processes and systems, culture transformation doesn't get left behind? And I have a follow-up question on that, but I'll allow you to answer that first one.
All right, let me share. I'll go first this time. So we do a couple of things that I've found some work better than others. There are some aspects of the culture, we have to keep promoting it, number one. It can't be just something on a screensaver, right? But at the beginning of some key meetings, we have a culture moment where we give recognition to someone who has been displaying the culture. Probably that person maybe in the meeting, probably they're not even in the meeting. But I'm recognizing Ambassador Underwood for displaying Team Up, because I saw her doing this last week, and I believe that that's really good evidence of Team Up. Right? And so that promotion of what Ambassador Underwood did will then encourage others to do more of that. And it will encourage her to do that as well. But the other thing that I found really works well is we have something called focused feedback. Focused feedback is one-on-one. So I will get together with either of my panelists here and ask them for feedback. Please give me some feedback on how I've been doing with respect to X. Level up. And she will then say that we have it in affirmative to say, this is where you're doing this well, and this is where you could improve, or you could do this better. We have those two sections. So they affirm, right? So we do that. And because many people are not seeking the feedback as frequently as we should, I try to do that at the end of some of my executive meetings, where I then say to the team, all right, guys, pair up, and I will pair them up, right? That's why I'm forcing it, to then say, you guys now go off and give 5 minutes of feedback to each other, and that's how we get that done. So those are some of the practices, the disciplines that you have to build in to it's just like if you're a Christian, you have to have daily Bible reading and daily prayer and so on, and go to church regularly. So there are some disciplines that you have to practice if you're going to ensure that the culture is embedded.
I want to add to that. One of the things I've noticed in organizations in the context of culture and cultural transformation is that organizations are not honest about the truth about their culture. Cultural transformation starts with recognizing and acknowledging what is. Change starts with acknowledging and recognizing what is. What is the culture? Cultural and understanding the culture of an organization starts with identifying the behaviors that are rewarded in the organization, the behaviors that are reinforced, the practices that are applauded, and recognize what the culture in the organization really is. Yeah. Once you have recognized and you've acknowledged and identified what the culture is in the organization and the truth about the culture, you can then say, well, okay, this is who we want to be. Organizations have, on the board, they say we believe in this, that, and all the rest of it. But that, having slogans, having watchwords, etc., doesn't easily translate. An organization needs to tell people this is the behavior that recognizes commitment. So committed staff do A, B, C, D. Engaged staff display this, and that behavior. So what is the culture you want to see? What are the behaviors that reflect that culture? And how are those behaviors going to be integrated into how you measure performance and reward performance in the organization? How are those behaviors going to become part of your KPIs, the key performance indicators in the organization? And how are they going to be referenced? And then you can have the cultural check-ins. You know, if somebody flies off the handle, you want to build an organization that will engage in conversations about culture, and they will say, listen, you know, Bob or Babette, when you shouted at this person in the meeting, you know, in our culture, these are the behaviors that we would like to see. We don't really want that to see, and it has to become so embedded in the organization that everybody is able to do that. So the cleaner can tell the executive, sir, I just want to be respectful, but you know, when you shouted at me and you threw ABC at me, it hurt my feelings. It made me feel really horrible. And from a cultural point of view, now the thing is, it is a journey to get to that point. And it has a journey that has to be characterized with openness, honesty, transparency, and trust. Low trust organizations have serious cultural problems. If people in an organization feel they can't trust anybody in the organization, people are going to be defensive, and they're going to engage in behaviors to make themselves feel safe. So when you've identified the culture you want, you've identified the behaviors you want to see, you have to do a pulse check on the trust levels in the organization. So that, and then you have to build trust. And how do you build trust? By transparency, by honesty, by empathy, and by truth, and by subordinating yourself as a leader.
And one thing I would add to that is to have an accountability framework to reinforce it.
Absolutely.
Right? Because that point that you made there in terms of people being able to give feedback and feel safe in doing so.
Yes.
And it's not, you know, 100% endorsed. It's not just about the core values or the labels, but what is the behavior that aligns with this. So there's no room for, you know, misinterpretation. Accountability is the glue that joins up commitment and results. Without the accountability, there's no guarantee you're going to get the targeted results.
Yeah,
indeed, indeed.
Just to say that we followed your recommendation, because flowing from the cultural beliefs, flowing from the cultural beliefs, we desired behaviors.
Absolutely.
What are the behaviors?
Yeah.
And we've actually used those for the performance appraisals.
Perfect.
So we looked at what are the desired appraisals for team members below the managerial level, what are the desired behaviors for managers and senior managers and so on, in keeping with those cultural beliefs. And those have found their way into the performance appraisal process.
Absolutely.
So
And I would
I'm proud to say that we followed your process.
Well done. And involve your people in developing those behaviors.
Yes.
Because then you have ownership.
Yeah.
Indeed. I've gotten my time signal wrap up, but I'll leave room for one more question. Is there another?
Person hungry.
She had a follow-up.
People ready for lunch.
Well, my follow-up question was basically answered. It was a new question based on what Mr. Campbell said about the appraisal system. I was just checking to see what system it was, whether it is a 360-degree framework by chance.
Yeah, what we did is something akin to 360, not full, but so we used the person was rated on her desired behaviors by the immediate supervisor, by some peers, and by the supervisor one level above. So the supervisor of your immediate supervisor. So, so those are the persons who participated in that process. Yeah.
Okay, thanks so much.
Good.
All right. So we've come to the end of this session. We really hope that it was helpful. I know there are many more questions out there. Some persons may not have got the chance to ask, but you know we are always available at the Transformation Implementation Unit. You can reach out to us, and we will continue. As I say, change is a journey. We want to thank our panelists, and you know the responses were really spot on, and I can see you know the reaction from the audience. So you know, continue the journey. You have the information. You can reach out to us, and we wish you all the best as you continue this change journey within your individual organizations.
A pleasure. Pleasure.
President.
Pleasure, sir. That's it. Good.
Thank you very much. Ambassador Underwood, I'll just ask you to stay on stage for just a minute, please. Thank you so much to our panelists. And thanks to our change management specialist moderator, Dwayne Dillon. And clap yourselves, ladies and gentlemen, for the fantastic questions that you threw out to ensure that the conversation was even deeper, right? Wonderful job. All right, I'm going to invite Executive Director, Ms. Maria Thompson-Walters, to come as we do a few presentations. We want to thank first Ambassador Joan Underwood.
Right here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Underwood. She did a fantastic job and provided so much information for us, correct? And next, the TIU team, of course, wants to say thank you to keynote speaker and panelists who shared such insightful comments, Mr. Courtney Campbell. Thank you. Maria, please stay with us when you're finished with the presentation. All right. Thank you, Mr. Campbell. Now, ladies and gentlemen, the Change Evangelist is a digital tool, but we know at times technology fails, and managing that is also a part of the change management process, isn't it? And so we would like to present a physical copy to each ministry. And Ms. Maria Thompson-Walters will make the presentation. I'll invite each permanent secretary or a representative to receive the playbook. Let's start first with the Office of the Prime Minister. Representative from the Office of the Prime Minister. Okay. Minister of Agriculture, Fisheries and Mining. Right. Someone's coming. To be followed by the Ministry of Culture, Gender, Entertainment and Sport. Mac Jess? Okay. Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation. Ministry of Education and Youth. Yes, I think we saw someone. Okay. To be followed by the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service. And then could we have the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade? Yeah, he's here. Ministry of Health and Wellness will follow. All right, representative is coming. Ministry of Industry, Investment and Commerce. Personal point of pride that the representative from Ministry of Health is a St. Hilda's old girl like myself. People from country, there are more of us. This is fantastic. I also claim St. Jacob because I went there for 6 4 minutes. So, all right. Then Ministry of Justice. Right. After Ministry of Justice, may we invite the representative from the Ministry of Labor and Social Security, please. After MLSS, let's have the representative from the Ministry of Legal and Constitutional Affairs. As they're on their way, may we have the representative from the Ministry of Local Government and Community Development. Ministry of National Security will follow. Thank you. Thank you. Then Ministry of Science, Energy, Telecommunications and Transport. Not seeing our representative. Okay. Ministry of Tourism. And someone is coming. So this is a sort of forward thinking that we heard, and the panelists asked us to make sure that in preparing we consider all the things that may happen and have something in place to address that. So we're very happy to see this initiative. Another rousing round of applause for all the change makers, change champions, who are going to continue the work of creating the change you want to see in the public service. Ladies and gentlemen, the TIU team would like to get your feedback on today. And so in your packets, there is a QR code that will take you to a survey. And we are kindly asking that you scan the QR code and complete that survey. This one is not anything that we will bring up on screen. We want to hear from you how the day went for you. All right? And any specific feedback on the occasion. So, What an inspiring day we have been having. Would you agree? Oh, hold on. Let's try that again. What an inspiring day we have been having. Would you agree? Great, because I know we're not starving, even though we're close to lunchtime. From stories of transformation to the formal handover of our national change management methodology. Today marks the beginning of a new era in the Jamaican public sector, in public sector transformation. And I think we should all be very, very excited about that. Yes? Good. Yes, the applause is welcome, and I see the team from EY. On behalf of the Transformation Implementation Unit, the TIU, thank you for joining us, for those who are in the room and for those who joined us online and remained engaged. Thank you for your continued commitment to change. Thank you for being champions of change, for being the committed change agents. Ladies and gentlemen, we now invite you to stay with us for lunch and enjoy the refreshments. Let us keep advocating. Let us keep evangelizing change. Transformation starts with all of us. It doesn't take one person, but that commitment to engaging the team is very, very important to getting the buy-in, even if it means at the beginning, making yourself the one who listens and learns, and maybe that includes a tour or a dedicated hour to ensure that you're hearing from those who are part of the process. The TIU continues to listen to you and continues to support the transformation and the change management process. It has been my pleasure being your Master of Ceremonies today. My name is Kamisha Swaby. Enjoy lunch and have a great rest of the day and a wonderful rest of the week. Thank you.